We have President's Rule. The President Rule is under Article 356. Deals with the President's Rule. The President's Rule is also called as a state emergency or constitutional emergency. So the Constitution itself is wanting an emergency. Constitutional failure in the state leads to such kind of an emergency. So we can say this as the President's Rule or the state emergency, or even the Constitution itself is having an emergency. The three types of the names which is given for the President's Rule under Article 356 is President's Rule or Constitutional Emergency or the State's Emergency. What is the ground of imposition? We have Article 355. The center is having a duty to ensure that the government of every state is run in accordance with the Constitution. So that is a duty of the center. The center is having a duty. What is the duty of the center? To ensure that the government is run in accordance with the Constitution. We have the government, right, and the government must run in accordance with the Constitution. It is the duty of the center. Then we have Article 356 is when the center is taking over of the state government on the grounds of failure of constitutional machinery. This is on the failure of constitutional machinery. Article 365 deals with the center taking over the state government if the state government fails to comply with the central government direction. If it fails to comply with the direction of the central government, then it is the time when the central government can apply President's Rule over the state government. Now we have Article 355 where it states that the duty of the central government to ensure that every state is run in accordance with the Constitution. It is their duty to check whether every state is run in accordance with the Constitution. And what is Article 356? We have Article 356, right? The center can take over the state government on grounds of the failures of the constitutional machinery. What is Article 365? Whenever the state is going to fails to comply with or give effect to any direction from the center, the state is going to fail to comply with or to give effect to the directions issued from the center. Parliamentary approval. The proclamation must be approved by both the houses of the parliament within 2 months from the date of its issue. Right. So we say that such a kind of a proclamation must be approved by both the houses of the parliament. The proclamation is approved by both the houses of the parliament. It is approved by both houses. We will be having the proclamation, right? So the proclamation must be approved by both the houses of the parliament within 2 months from the date of its issue. So we just have 2 months from the date of the issue. If the Lok Sabha is dissolved at the time of the proclamation, it can approve it within 30 days after the reconstitution if Rajya Sabha has approved it in the meantime. So 2 months is the time. But when the case of Lok Sabha being dissolved, it needs to approve within 1 month. If the Lok Sabha is being dissolved, it needs to approve within 1 month after it is going to reconstitute it. Every time the approval is going to require 6 months. The approval and the continuation needs a 6 months, not 6 months, simple majority. Right. So it is very easy to remember that the parliament approval is required for the proclamation of emergency proclaimed by the president. So parliament's approval is needed. Parliament, in the sense, both the houses must be approved within 2 months from the date of the issue. Both houses of the parliament must accept this within 2 months. But in case if Lok Sabha is dissolved, it is just 30 days for the approval of the Lok Sabha. Right. If Lok Sabha is dissolved, it is just 30 days. Whereas in case if two houses are present, then they have 2 months. And they all approve with a simple majority. The duration, if approved by both the houses, it continues for 6 months only. And it can be extended for a period of 3 years with approval every time. This 44th Constitutional Amendment Act says that beyond 1 year, the President's Rule extended for 6 years when 2 conditions are fulfilled. National emergency must be operational throughout the whole of India. Election Commission must certify that such resolution is necessary due to difficulties in holding the elections to the Legislative Assembly of the state concerned. The revocation is done by the President and it does not require any parliamentary approval. Here also for the President's rule, we have 44th Constitutional Amendment Act taking place. What does it say? That the duration of the approval for President's rule, when both the houses have accepted, it is just for 6 months and they can extend to a period of 3 years, not indefinitely in case of national emergency. They can extend the maximum to a period of 3 years. Whereas we have the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act, it is beyond 1 year. If there is a extension, it needs to be two conditions needs to be fulfilled. So beyond 1 year, if there is an extension, two conditions needs to be fulfilled. Beyond 1 year, if there is an extension, extended by 6 months. Beyond the first year, it can be extended by 6 months when two conditions are fulfilled. The first condition is the national emergency being operation in the whole of India or in any part of the state. Next, we have the Election Commission certifying that such a resolution because it is impossible to conduct elections. National emergency and Election Commission certifying, right? National emergency and Election Commission certifying. Revocation is by the President at the time of the at any point of the time, does not need parliamentary approval. It can be removed any time and it does not require any parliamentary approval. What are the consequences of the President's rule? President's extraordinary powers during the President's rule, like he can take up the functions of the state government, right? So the government comes under the control of the President and the powers is vested to the governor or any other executive authority of the state. He himself is taking the state government, or else he is assuming this power to the governor or any other executive authority in the state. Governor or any other executive authority, right? He can declare that the powers of the state legislature are to be exercised by the parliament. The President is declaring that the powers of the state legislature is exercised by the parliament and the government control is in the President or through anybody appointed by him, that is an executive authority appointed by him, who is in the state. He can take up necessary steps including the suspension of the constitutional provision relating to anybody or authority in the state. Right. Suspension of necessary steps including the suspension of any constitutional provisions. President can dismiss the state council of ministers who are headed by the chief ministers. When initially the president's rule is imposed, the chief minister and his council of ministers are only disposed of. The chief minister and the council of ministers are being disposed of. But the legislature is present. But the legislature is present until it is resolved through parliament. Right. President can dismiss the state council of ministers headed by the chief minister. So from first, if we look into this, Parliament's approval is necessary when the President proclaims an emergency. The proclamation must be approved by both the houses of the Parliament. Both houses must approve this proclamation, right, of emergency. Within 2 months, that time duration is 2 months from its date of issue. So both the houses must approve this from 2 months from the date of its issue, right? If Lok Sabha is dissolved at the time of proclamation, we say that if the Lok Sabha is being dissolved over here, it can approve it within 13 days of its reconstitution if Rajya Sabha has approved it in the meantime. Every approval and continuation needs a simple majority. If approved by both the houses of the Parliament, it continues for 6 months and can be extended for a maximum period of 3 years with approval of the Parliament every 6 months. Next, we have the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act. Beyond 1 year, the President's rule can be extended up to 6 months at a time only when two conditions are fulfilled. The national emergency should be operational in the whole of the India or in the state or in any part of the state. The Election Commission must certify that such resolution is necessary due to the difficulties in holding general elections to the Legislative Assembly of the state concerned. Now, what is the provision for the revocation? By President at any point of the time, there does not need a parliamentary approval. What is the consequence of the president's rule? The president is having extraordinary powers during the president's rule, right? He can take up the functions of the state government and also the powers vested with the governor or any other executive authority. He can declare that the powers of the state legislature are exercised by the parliament. He can take all the necessary steps during the suspension of the parliament. Suspension of he can also do constitutional provisions related to anybody or authority in the state. Right. The next thing over here is President dismissing the State Council of Ministers headed by the Chief Minister. State Governor on behalf carries the administration with the help of the Chief Secretary and advisors who are appointed by the President. The State Governor is taking the charge on behalf of the President for the state's administration. Right. So the State Governor is who they're taking the charges on the behalf of the President. He is doing these things on behalf of President and he carries the state administration with the help of the Chief Secretary of the state. With this, whose help? The Chief Secretary or any advisors who are appointed by the President. President either suspends or dissolves the State Legislative Assembly. The Parliamentary passes the State Legislative bills and the state budgets. So President is going to have two options. Either he is going to suspend or he is going to dissolve the State Legislative Assembly. He is dismissal, right? That is not there. So dismissal of the Chief Minister and Council of Ministers. But it comes to the State Legislative Assembly, he is having two options. What are the two options? He can either dissolve or he can suspend it. Suspend or dissolve. Right. When in case they are two options are only available. They are either suspended or they are dissolved. So in either cases they are not present. The Parliament is going to pass the state legislative bills and even the budgets. When the state legislature is suspended or dissolved, Parliament can delegate the power. This power is being delegated to the lawmaking power for the state to the President or to any authority specified by him on this regard. They just delegate this power. The lawmaking power is delegated to the President. Right. Now, the executive power, it belongs to the President only. But the legislative power, it belongs to the governor. The legislative power belongs to the Parliament. Parliament is the one which is going to have the legislative power and the Parliament is delegating. The Parliament is delegating the power to make the laws to the state, to the President or any other authority specified by him in this regard. The Parliament by the President or any other authority to make laws, conferring the powers and imposing the duties on the center or its officers and authorities. The President can authorize. So we'll be having the President can authorize when the Lok Sabha is not in the session or expenditure from the consolidated fund, pending in its sanction by the Parliament. Right. The President is only authorizing when a Lok Sabha is not in session, expenditure from the state, consolidated fund pending in sanction by the Parliament. President can promulgate when the Parliament is not in session ordinances for the governance of the state. A law made by the Parliament or the President. If there is a law made by the Parliament or we'll be having the law which is made by the President. Right. Or any other specified authority, it continues to be operative even after the President's rule. So the law does not ceases. Here, the law, as in case of national emergency, the law ceases, right? But the law does not ceases here. It ceases to be applied. The law is going to be applied in case of the President's rule. What are the national emergency? Article 356 and then President's rule is going to be Article 356, right? 352 and then we have the 356. Proclamation is proclaimed on the grounds of the war, external aggression or armed rebellion. This is going to be Article 356 and Article 365 is the grounds of proclamation. Right. We will be having proclaimed on two grounds. The President can issue the proclamation if he is satisfied that the government in a state cannot be carried on in accordance with the Constitution. He can act with or without the governor's report. Right. Here, governor can also send a report. In case this is Article 356 is related to carried in accordance with the Constitution. Whereas Article 365 is when they fail to compel comply with the or give effect to the any direction from the state. Now, what is the types of the majority? Special majority, whereas a simple majority. Every such situation must be passed by both the houses via a special majority. Every such resolution must be passed with a simple majority. What is parliamentary approval? Proclamation is imposing the national emergency must be proclaimed must be approval, like parliamentary approval, right, within 1 month from such date of its issue. But here the approval within 2 months from such date of issue. Here, the proclamation of the emergency, proclaiming or imposing the national emergency, must be approved by both the houses of the parliament within a month. We have within 1 month from the date of its issue, whereas we have the proclamation or imposing the president's rule must be approved by both the houses of the parliament within 2 months from the date of its issue. What is the case when if the proclamation is issued when the Lok Sabha is dissolved? Dissolution of the Lok Sabha within 1 month. The same dissolution of the Lok Sabha takes place during the period of 2 months without if the proclamation issued by the when the Lok Sabha is dissolved or dissolution takes place during the 2 months period, the proclamation will survive for 30 days from the first sitting of its reconstitution. Now we'll be having the case too if both house is going to approve the proclamation within a period of 2 months, then emergency continues for 6 months. Emergency continues for same 6 months. President's rule is going to continue for the 6 months. If both the houses are approved within a period of 2 months, right? Now, what is the extension of the national emergency? National emergency can be extended for indefinite period, but this is for a maximum period of 3 years, where the parliament approval for every 6 months. What if it is dissolved during the period of 6 months without approving it? The proclamation will survive 30 days from the first sitting of its reconstitution, but only if the Rajya Sabha has already approved its continuation. Now here we have what if the dissolution of the Lok Sabha takes place during the period of 6 months without approving the further continuation of the emergency president's rule. It survives for 30 days. Effect is going to be the center government. The center gets concurrent powers of administration and legislation. Here also the state executive is dismissed and the state legislature is either suspended or dissolved, right? Parliament makes the laws for the state. Who makes the laws for the state? We say that the parliament is the one which is going to make the laws for the state, and the executive and the legislative powers of the state are assumed by the center. Now, the relationship of the central with the states goes modification. Here also, the relationship of the state undergoes modification, which is under the president's rule. Revocation is done by a simple majority. Revocation does not require parliamentary approval by the president itself. The scope of judicial review, we say that the 38th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1975. 38th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1975 made it the satisfaction of the president in invoking Article 356. So satisfaction of the president is necessary. We say the final, it could not be challenged in any court in any ground. But this was being repelled by the 44th Constitutional Amendment itself, stating that the satisfaction of the president is not beyond judicial review. In this, the only important fact which we have to remember is S.R. Bommai case. Right. President proclamation is subject to the judicial review. President's rule. S.R. Bommai case is related to the president's rule. President's rule, if you dig, it is related to center-state relations. So, center-state relations is federal issue, right? So, S.R. Bommai case is indirectly involved to federalism. When the center is disturbing the state, it is affecting the federal nature of the state. So, the presidential proclamation is subject to the judicial review, is what stated in the S.R. Bommai case. When the president is proclaiming emergency, it is subject to the judicial review. The satisfaction of the president must be based on the relevant material. Burden lies on the center to prove that relevant material exists to justify the imposition of the president's rule. What does in case of the judicial review, what does the judiciary see, right? When we are applying the judicial review, what does the judiciary check for? The judiciary checks whether there is a relevant material available for to exist the justify the imposition of the president's rule. If the court holds that the proclamation was unconstitutional and invalid, it can restore the dismissed state government and revive the state legislative assembly. Dismiss state government and revive the state legislative assembly. State legislative assembly can be dissolved only after the parliament has approved the presidential proclamation. Until then, it is only suspended. The president can only suspend. In order for the president to dissolve the state legislative assembly, the parliament's approval is necessary. Now, what does we infer from the S.R. Bommai case? S.R. Bommai case suggests that, or it mentions that the presidential proclamation is subject to the judicial review. Right. The president's satisfaction must be based on a relevant material and burden of the center to prove that the relevant material exists for the imposition of the president's rule. So we say here that there is a relevant material for the imposition of the president's rule. If the court holds the proclamation was unconstitutional and invalid, it can revive a dismissal of the state government, that is Council of Ministers along with the CM, and then it can also revive the state legislative assembly. The state legislative assembly can be dissolved only if the parliament is approving it, the presidential proclamation. Until then, the president can only suspend the assembly. Because secularism is a basic feature of the constitution. It's not secularism, it is federalism. It's a basic feature of the constitution. Federalism is a basic feature of the constitution. Now we are going for the financial emergency is under Article 360, right? The president can proclaim the financial emergency if he or she is satisfied that the financial stability or the credibility of the India or any part of its territory is threatened. Now, who proclaims the financial emergency? Under Article 360, the president is the one who is going to proclaim the financial emergency. Under Article 360, the president is the one who is going to proclaim the financial emergency. If he or she, the satisfaction of them is needed at the financial stability or the credibility of India. We say that the financial stability or credibility of India or any part of its territory is threatened. Now, what is 44th Constitutional Amendment Act? The satisfaction of the president is even subject to when the president is satisfied. Now, this act is mentioning that his satisfaction is subject to judicial review. Allows judicial review, right? Even though if it is not mentioned in this, anyhow we are going to have a judicial review, but this act specifically mentions. Now the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act has its changes in the Article 352 National Emergency, Article 356 President's Rule, and Article 360 as well. The 360 is related to the financial emergency. Now in Article 360, what does it say? This satisfaction of the president here, right? It is subject to the judicial review. So the satisfaction of the president. Presidential satisfaction is subject to the judicial review, and what we need parliament approval, right? The same procedure for parliamentary approval in case of president's rule. The parliament must approve the president's proclamation within 2 months, and this is a simple majority. If Lok Sabha is dissolved, it must approve it within 30 days of the reconstitution, given that Rajya Sabha is going to approve it in the meantime. The resolution approving the proclamation can be either House of the Parliament only by simple majority. The duration is once they approved, it continues indefinitely till dissolved. This alone is having changed with the national president's rule, and we have the national emergency. So what is the change? Once it is approved by the House, it continuously goes for indefinite period till it is revoked. There is no maximum period prescribed for its operation, right? So this is the maximum limit. There is no maximum limit as such which is prescribed for its operation, and it is repeated parliamentary approval is not required for its continuation, and it does not need a parliamentary approval, and it can be revoked by the president at any time. Effects of the financial emergency is the center is can direct the states to observe financial propriety. The directions by the Parliament can include provisions for the reduction of the salaries allowances of the persons who are serving in the states, reservation of all the money bills and other financial bills for the consideration of the President after they are passed by the state. The President can direct the reduction of the salaries or allowances of persons serving a union or the judges of the Supreme Court or the High Court. The center gets full control over the state financial matters. No financial emergency has been declared so far. There are certain changes made by 44th Amendment Act 1978. The amendment is changing the armed rebellion was repealed for internal disturbances under Article 352 of the Constitution. The proclamation should be communicated by the cabinet ministers and is in the writing for declaration of emergency under the leadership of Prime Minister. Both the houses of the parliament must be there during the proclamation of emergency within 1 month of the time. Right. The houses must reapprove the emergency within 6 months for its continuation. For the revocation of the emergency, the passing of simple majority resolution and voting. In case of armed rebellion, Article 19 will not be suspended after the amendment was declared. That Article 19 will only be suspended only at the time of war or external aggression. It is also said that Article 20 and 21 will not be included in the suspension of the right to move to the courts for violation of Part 3 of the Indian Constitution, which is fundamental rights. The term Lok Sabha is decreased from 5 years from 6 years. These changes are made during the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act were made with the aim to improve upon the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1976 for the improvement of national emergency too.